Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First, I want to start off by introducing our guests. Both sets of guests up here. Jeff Welch and Mark Donaldson. Go ahead and give them a round of applause for coming. And Don Casey and Ken Freeman. And go ahead and give yourselves a round of applause for coming out and being active participants and finding out more about your government. We're going to begin today by allowing these gentlemen here and these gentlemen here to introduce themselves to you and introduce what they do, where they come from, a little bit about themselves to kind of set the stage and get everybody up to speed about what they do. And we'll start off with our gentlemen over here. They got a short presentation, PowerPoint presentation, and go ahead and give them a round of applause.
Thank you very much for this resonated, okay? Senior moment already. Push rewind. I am Jeff Welch, the director of the Knoxville Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which is an organization that looks at transportation issues from a regional perspective, working with state, federal, and local governments to ensure that where we invest our transportation dollars, we're getting the greatest gain and benefit from that transportation investment. Both streets and highways and mass transit, bicycles and greenways. TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, has been around since the mid-1970s. There's an organization like this called this in every urban area throughout the country that has a 50,000 population or greater. So Jackson, Tennessee, to Morristown, Tennessee, to New York City has a similar organization that I had housed within the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and Mark will talk a little bit more about that. Background, just personally, grew up in the Midwest, from Wisconsin, school in Wisconsin, and worked in Iowa, graduate school in Virginia, and worked in South Dakota, and moved here 26 years ago, that's 27 years ago. So, not quite a native yet. Maybe my grandson would be treated as a native, or accepted as a native, I'm not sure. But I have a 2.5-year-old grandson and a little granddaughter along the way that should be born in here in October. So, and personally, I guess right now, planning, why do I do planning? It's for them. It's for my grandkids. I want them to have a great place to live and work and play in East Tennessee. That's the bottom line from my perspective. We want what I cherish. I go out and hike and bike and have a respectable job. I can get to work in a reasonable time. I want to be able to have the next generation, be able to have similar opportunities that we've had. Similar opportunities what my parents and your parents and my grandparents were doing. So we have to continue, at least from my perspective. That is what we're trying to do. For the planners have, for the personal planners have, is where I come from. So I'll let Mark do a little introduction, then we'll go through a presentation that talks about Plan East Tennessee, this regional planning effort that began approximately 18 months ago.
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Mark Donaldson. I am the director of the Knoxville-Knox County Metropolitan Planning Commission. It's a mouthful, but it was created in 1956 when County Judge Howard Bozeman and Mayor Jack Dance of the city of Knoxville cooperated to create the agency, thinking that if the two county and city planning commissions worked together, they would do a better job for all of the citizens of Knox County. So we've been around since 1956. We're one of just a handful of metropolitan planning commissions, which are in state law referred to as regional planning commissions. Anytime more than two or more governmental entities join together on planning, it's called a regional planning commission. We've got 36 employees in the agency. We do development review, we do comprehensive planning, we do information gathering, research, data collection, and analysis, and then Jeff's group does the transportation planning for a region that extends outside of the county boundaries and includes what's known as the Knoxville urbanized area, according to folks at the Department of Transportation and the Census Department. But we got involved in Plan East Tennessee when we heard of the competition for grants from HUD. Our staff prepared the grant application, and we're lucky enough to receive it, and that started a process 18 months ago that will take us through the end of 2013, when we hope to have a regional strategy for improving the area done and completed and accepted by as many folks in the 5-county region as possible. Personally, I'm a newcomer. I've only been here 8 years. Came here from Texas, part of the reverse migration from Texas back to Tennessee. But I grew up in the Midwest as well, and have worked in a variety of planning instances, from state government to regional government, county government, and local government. And I've also worked for about half of my career in the private sector for architectural and engineering firms, and in the development business as well. So I've literally been on both sides of the desk that I now occupy. And with that, if we can get the presentation queued up. Yeah, we have to move the podium.
Here, I got it.
Oh, you're going to do
You want me to do it, or you want to come do it?
Oh, I can do it over there. Let me just work without the...
It'll be a few minutes before the ball warms up.
When we were asked to participate in this, Kelly wanted us to just give a brief PowerPoint presentation, so we'll try to have the same understanding what Plan East Tennessee is, where we have been with the process and where we are today, and then briefly where we're hoping to be in the future. If I wasn't here this morning, my wife is out there doing a Habitat for Humanity house, so I'm not sure she's out there doing a roof, and I'm going to be inside here being comfortable. So.
Turn down the lights.
Yeah.
So we need to turn the lights up. Is that close? But don't lock the door. As Mark indicated, Plan East Tennessee is a regional dialogue for the 5-county area that's been identified as our standard metropolitan statistical area. It includes Union, Anderson, Knox, Loudoun, and Blount County. And it is an approach to try to identify ways that we can regionally cooperate to improve and enhance our region. So we're hoping to have, through this, as a dialogue and a conversation about continued prosperity and economic vitality of the region, strategy that lays out priorities for action that local governments can take. This is not a plan that would, a strategy that anyone but local governments would be able to implement. And again, implementation is at the local level, with the local decision makers, the city council, and county commissioners, and dialogue with the community to implement any policies. There's been another visioning process out there. I like to relate to visioning as if you're driving down the interstate, and if you only look at that one car right in front of you, you don't see what the other cars are doing, 15 or 20 or 30 cars out in front of you, you could be in big trouble if there's an incident or whatever. So you need to be looking, and we need to be looking beyond 1 year. We're focusing on 5 areas of issues here. Economy and workforce seems to be, continues to be a driving issue, the major issue that is coming out of our discussions and dialogue. How will we continue to maintain our economic competitiveness throughout the country? Transportation infrastructure. Just did a meeting Wednesday with the TDOT commissioner. We have the 4th best transportation system in the country, but the revenues continue to fall because the way our vehicles are getting more and more efficient. Revenues continue to fall throughout the country and statewide. How are we going to continue to maintain the investment infrastructure we have out there? Housing in neighborhoods, continue to have good, prosperous, and safe neighborhoods. Clean environment, good water, clean air. We are non-attainment for ozone and PM 2.5. How can we do that? How can we improve? And whether we can do much of it locally, because a lot of air quality comes from plants in the Midwest or plants down in Birmingham, but there is this part that we need to do. And then healthy communities. Obesity and diabetes rates, and that is really extremely high in East Tennessee and throughout the South, and the ways that we can work to improve that. A number of partners, we're not listed, that have asked to participate early on in this adventure. Several of them continue to participate, ranging from local governments and state governments and private nonprofits. So again, taking a regional approach, the slide on your right looks at and it shows the number of folks that it gives you a understanding of the commuting patterns. Union County, about 65 to 70% of the folks in Union County commute out of their county to other counties for work. They're traveling long ways to get to their jobs and their employment. There's about 12,000 that go from Knox to Anderson County. There's 9,000 that go from Anderson to Knox County, 14,000 from Blunt to Knox County. So within this region, a number of people travel quite a ways for their employment. And that's good. I mean, it ties us together where people live and work. It does look at and put strain on our transportation infrastructure. And then again, the healthy environment, the range of jobs that we have to work with are really critical. So where we are now, we're trying to establish a shared identity and vision for the next 30 to 40 years. We started officially process in October of 2011. Done a number of 2 series of public forums and outreach efforts. Create a livability report card that looks at the data that is today, and how do we compare statewide and nationally on a lot of key factors. And then we have trying to establish a regional vision this coming throughout this time period now through the end of the year. So what we've learned is there's a lot of issues that people agree about. There's opinions about the differing role of government has and how we should lead within this region. We have regional challenges, but there are local needs. Transportation is like an example. There's local transportation issues in each county, but there's tremendous regional transportation needs. There's infrastructure needs when it comes to wideband or wireless. A lot of places in Union County do not have that. Some of our strengths, again, which most of you know, are related to affiliating our medical and strong employment centers, our natural beauty of mountains, rivers, and open spaces that attract millions and millions of tourists to this area. We need to continue to try to take advantage of that, maintain and protect those amenities. Quality jobs are needed. We're growing in jobs, but the number of jobs seem to be growing more and more in the service sector that are not paying well as those that we used to have in this region. Hotels and motels and retail jobs are growing, but they're not paying. They're not paying the $20 to $30 per hour jobs that we need to maintain a good, healthy family and a healthy community. Some of the things that issues that just come up through our discussion is, again, what is the role of government? Is there too much government? How do we plan? How do we work around regional issues and still let local governments continue to move forward where their desires are? Counties have very honestly different needs. Union County has different needs in some respects than Loudoun County. Most important regional issues that we collected through a survey of 400 people from each of the counties. Lack of good paying jobs. The University of Tennessee conducted this survey. Lack of good paying jobs, pollution air, rivers and lakes, roads and highways, lack of public transportation, even that we heard out in Union and Anderson County. There are no transportation choices beyond just the automobile. And again, just adds a little data about our region. We heard a lot about quality education and drug use. We're not going to be able to address drug use through this process, but it continues to be a serious problem for families and a serious problem for employers. Mark, I'll just turn it briefly over to you. Right there.
All right. Put my finger on it. Yeah. Okay, so we've spent since October listening to folks through our 2 series of community forums and meeting with groups throughout the 5-county region over that period of time. We've also collected and analyzed data, published the livability report as a summary of that data. Those 2 things we found were matching up very well, and on top of that, we worked with the University of Tennessee to do that 5-county survey of 2,000 people. We had a response of 2,400 from each county, a statistically valid survey. That survey corroborated what we had heard from listening to people and what we had seen from analyzing the data. So we feel we've got a pretty good idea on where the community is as far as the issues that have been identified and the problems that we all know that are out there. We've been looking and meeting with people, looking at data and meeting with people to identify trends and what really drives those trends and drives change in our community. We know that there are enormous demographic shifts going on. Our population is aging. The population of natives is actually shrinking. We know that we've got a desire to separate land uses and disperse development on the part of a lot of people. That results in the loss of agricultural land quite often. Our transportation options are relatively few, driven by the personal preferences for automobiles. We know that people choose to locate where there are amenities, where there are good schools. Energy costs, particularly in the last few years of gasoline, is an enormous driver of change and a factor in location decisions. We've analyzed the employment structure and know that our fastest growing employment sectors are those that pay the lowest wages and have the limited opportunities for job advancement. And we know that there's a clamoring out there for better food, activity, and lifestyle opportunities for everybody, for more choices for folks. So this all gets fed into the equation when we begin looking to the future. We know that things are going to change. There's Level Road, Cedar Bluff 40 years ago. So we know things change. We know what's on the horizon. This region has an incredibly stable and consistent slope of population increase. And we can project that out to 2040 and see that, whoops, I got to talk faster to keep up. We know that we need to accommodate 300,000 additional people by the year 2040 and to accommodate 240,000 new jobs. So our exercise will be to analyze the different ways to go about doing that. Part of that is to look at the trends. Planners talk about scenarios. This is our trend scenario. 1950, that's what our population looked like. The darker the area, the denser the population. You can very easily pick out the communities in each of the counties. Well, by 2010, this is what the population looks like spread across the 5 counties, and you see how it's been dispersed over those 60 years. For 2040, this is the picture that we're projecting, with 43% more residents and 54% more jobs. The big blobs are the national park and the state and national forests, Sharp Chapel area up in Union County. But you can see that this is our trend scenario. So as we begin going forward, we're going to be looking at different options from that trend and taking ideas from people, whether it's increasing amenities in the city to encourage more growth in the city, thereby preserving the rural landscape, or dispersing the population throughout the 5 counties evenly. And I'm reminded that I came across an article this summer about a regional planning project that was first voiced in 1921. A young architect wrote an article in the Architect's Monthly Journal about a regional approach to planning, and it took something like 15 or 16 years to get that idea up and running. And as a result of that 1921 idea by one person on regional planning, we have the Appalachian Trail. So if we can get one good idea to come out of this regional planning process that can ferment for a while and people can grab onto it, take ownership of it, and get it done one way or the other, we don't care how it gets done, as long as good ideas get done, we're all going to be better off. So we've established a website, PlanETN.org. That's where all of the data and results from all of the meetings are being posted. You can see the scenarios that we'll be talking about. The trend scenario will be posted shortly. We're still working on it. And the schedule for upcoming events is always available on our website. So keep track of us there. And with that, I will turn the lights back on. I think this is the last slide. Oh, we're in the...
If we can get somebody to get those lights. All right, everybody, give Jeff Welch and Mark Donaldson a hand. I thank everybody for their attention during that, and now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Don Casey and Ken Freeman to give you a little introduction to who they are.
I appreciate all you folks turning out on a Saturday. My name is Kenneth Freeman. I live in North Alabama on a cattle ranch. Actually, all I wanted to do when I grew up was be a cowboy. I did one of those things. A little closer. A little closer? Yeah. I managed to become a cowboy. I'm not sure I've grown up yet. Along the way, I did, Too close. Too close. I probably don't even need it. But anyway, along the way, I graduated from the University of Georgia in animal science, and I've done some master's degree work in economics. Did 3 tours of duty in Vietnam as a Navy pilot. Got a job with Southern Airways as an airline pilot. 5 mergers later, I retired as a captain from Northwest. And just like Delta all of my life, but now that I see them on my paychecks, I'm beginning to learn to live with them too. So they've all got Northwest. Things are very volatile in the airline industry. I'm chairman of a group that we formed about 12 years ago called Alliance for Citizens' Rights. Volume okay now? Okay. And we're primarily concerned with property rights issues and constitutional issues. People ask me a lot of times how I got into this. I was at a county commissioners meeting one time, and somebody in the audience spoke of something called the Wildlands Project. When it was over with, I asked him what it was all about and started looking at some maps. And Alabama was the first state in the United States to map every square inch of the state because of NASA being there. And there was a program called Virtuosity. And basically what this program had is everything that is known about any piece of property was on this program. Back then, any citizen could go on the internet and they could look at it. They've taken it down now to the point where only public officials have the codes to get on there. But anyway, I went to that site. I was looking at the Wildlands project and I looked up my cattle ranch. And everything within 3 miles of the Tennessee River, my ranch, my neighbors' ranches, all of my neighbors up and down that river was color-coded dark green. When I looked down into the code, it said human-free habitat. And so from that second on, I knew that if I didn't do something to fight this, that the environmental movement was going to take my property and all of my neighbors' property and they were going to turn it into human-free habitat, whether we chose to do that or not. And so we got in the business of property rights, formed the Alliance for Citizens' Rights, and we've been working on that ever since. Like I said, I think this was back in about 2000. So we've been at it a while. We've managed to pass some legislation in Alabama that you probably heard about. The due process bill under the Constitution, it's called. And that got quite a bit of press in Europe. It got some press here in the United States. It's a heck of a note when you have to read a European paper, the London Telegraph, and find out what's really going on in the U.S. But they reported more on this than the U.S. newspapers did. Started getting phone calls from a lady in Australia. She sounded Australian anyway. So we talked about it, and so one day she said, well, will you come? And I said, come where? She said, Sydney. I said, as in Sydney, Australia? And she said, yes. So I said, that's a long way to go, and I'll send you all the paperwork, and we'll send you DVDs of our presentations and save you all that money and all the hard wear and tear on us. And she said, no. We want you to come there and talk about this to the Australian Parliament and other government functionaries because we're losing control of our country. Can't hear?
No. Need your audio fixed, please.
So anyway, we're going to Australia, Don and I, the first 2 weeks in September, and we're going to tour the country and talk to the Parliament and government officials about how to try to save the property rights of the Australian citizens. And that's all I need to say at this point. Don?
I'll try this mic. Is it any better?
Yeah, much better. It's not a matter of the mic, it's the position.
The position of the mic and whether or not you're getting some sort of feedback. I hear a whisp in it. Is that it?
You're
objection?
fine right now.
You're fine right now.
Okay, I'll start over. You want me to start
Okay, is it still okay? All right, my name's Don Casey, and I spent 4 years in the Navy, went back to Birmingham, my hometown, spent 33 years in a steel mill, watched as society just disintegrated before my eyes. I mean, my lifetime is a very short period of time. And believe me, this is as old as I am. I know that this is not the world I grew up in. If you're anywhere close to my age, you certainly recognize we have problems, serious problems. Well, along about 1992, there was, of course, a rather hot contest for the presidency, and there was 3 people running. NAFTA was a big issue at the time, and they kept telling us what NAFTA was all about, but they never quoted anything that was in the document. Now, I haven't read very much. I have no credentials whatsoever, you know, other than just the average person. But for me to order overnight express from Washington, D.C., the 2 volumes of NAFTA, and then sit down and spend the next 3-4 months studying this to the point that I could quote it like the Bible, to say that this was an eye-opener is an understatement. So from that point then, I also knew that in 1992 there was something called the Earth Summit. It's also been called Agenda 21, and it is actually this document right here. It was signed by President Bush. It is only one of many plans of action at the local, national, and international level to institute something called sustainable development. Now, we hear a great deal about planning, and actually, as long as the government plans for their property and their assets, I'm okay with that. But when they begin to plan my future and my private property rights, then I have something I think I ought to speak to. And that's where we are, because if they plan what they intend to plan for in the future, we're going to have a lot of problems in this country that's going to make what we have already seen monumental. It's just quite unbelievable what has already been agreed to. And they talk about these plans as if you're going to have input. Well, you're going to be welcome to come in and sit at their facilitated meetings and hear what the facilitator has to say, but the outcomes are already set in stone. It's sustainable development. It is the philosophy that has been implemented in legislation across many years in this country. It didn't have a name until 1987. And so now if you read the Department of Sustainability for not the city of Knoxville, they actually have a citizen's guide to sustainable development. What you as a citizen should do. Lewis County, Tennessee, is all of the elected officials, and by the way, the handout in the lobby is that proclamation, and they want everyone to adopt the tenets of sustainability and inspire others to do the same. So while if you attend these meetings of the planners in the future, have questions and knowledge about sustainable development and what it means to your private property rights and your life, and begin to ask pertinent questions. Because that's the problem that I have seen, is that the average person in society has no concept of what sustainable development is all about, and therefore they can't ask a question. So I'm hoping that this session this morning will reveal much information about what is planned. Because taking the $4.3 million grant from the federal government has already tied the counties in this area to that specific plan, and in the notice of funds available, which is the document from the federal government, we have extrapolated some information from that, and it's a handout in the lobby that goes through and tells what these people are responsible for to regulate. Now, that means that their group, their oversight is going to grow, their bureaucracy is going to grow, and the only job opportunity is going to be with government to regulate what we can or cannot do. So with that, then I hope that we can...
Tell them about the meeting this afternoon.
The meeting this afternoon will be a presentation specifically about sustainable development with examples from here and also what has been going on elsewhere in the country. So hope you'll attend.
All right, now to the part where everybody gets to ask questions, where you from the public can ask questions. I want to go ahead and recognize the lady in the yellow dress back there. She has the microphone. She'll be bringing it to you as you have questions. It's my wife, Bethany. Everybody thank her for going on and helping us today. And go ahead and give all these gentlemen a round of applause for sharing with us and introducing themselves. Now, as far as these questions go, I want to keep them to local issues. Want to make sure we're talking about issues in the region they discuss, either Knox, Anderson, Loudon, around here, and Tennessee in general. We don't want to talk about, we want to keep it local.
Okay.
Also, we want to make sure that we ask respectful questions. We want to keep this as civil as possible. So, with that, let's go ahead and begin. Who has the first question? Go ahead and get Bethany to come down. Gentleman up front. Go ahead.
That's my question to the gentleman on my left. The data you showed, the ratings, or the 2.1 or whatever, what was that compared to? I mean, how big a region was that data gathered from? So how do we know? So we see on your scale that, okay, X, Y, and Z is bad, worse, worser, but what was that compared? Is it something national or what?
You all want to clarify the statistic that he's
Yeah, there was a slide that showed an array of issues, and there was a numerical value associated with each of those. That was from the community survey, which was a response of 2,000 people in the 5-county region, 400 from each of the counties. And it simply is a ranking relative to each other, as far as ranking a rank order of those issues compared to each other. It's not a comparison to any statewide number or anything else.
Okay, next question. Saw her go up first.
Good morning. When your property is involved in an area like this cattle rancher's property where you're shown as a green zone, as a property owner, would that mean that you're going to change the zoning of my property? Therefore, by the way, in real estate, one of the most dramatic and destabilizing things that can happen in a community is a zoning change. How is it that if I'm shown on your chart as in a green area, you are going to impact my ownership of my property? You're going to switch the zoning on me? You're going to raise my taxes? How are you going to chase me out of my property? And what compensation are you putting in place to do that, if any? Do you understand my question?
I guess to clarify, are there going to be green zones? And would there be an effort to take property that will be in said zones? And how would the people be compensated?
I'm not familiar with the Alabama plan and what the text showed as the description of that area. But with regard to zoning, only the legislative body of that local jurisdiction has the authority to change the zoning. And there is a due process for that.
It's got to be turned on. No, it's not. Okay, there.
Only a legislative body in a local jurisdiction can change zoning. And there are required public hearings. For example, the City of Knoxville City Council is the final authority on all zoning within the City of Knoxville. Knox County Commission is the final authority on all zoning outside of Farragut and Knoxville. Only they can change the zoning map.
I understand that part. What I'm concerned is that when the government coughed up $4.3 million, that meant Knox County and Loudoun County and Blount County were agreeing to certain things. And one of those things, in my eyes, is you're going to need to develop your city like this or your county like this. So I think the pressure would be to them to live to the agreement of following what the plan is. So you may say, yeah, it's up to them to rubber stamp it, but they may be compelled to do that by having received this money.
Well, state law says that in order to have a zoning code and a zoning map for a jurisdiction, there has to be a comprehensive land use plan in place. So all of our counties except Union have zoning and have a comprehensive plan in place. The legislative body would have to adopt a new plan, new comprehensive plan, to replace what they have if they're going to change that. Otherwise, all zoning is done in accordance with, has to be consistent with that comprehensive plan. And it is not a requirement that all of the jurisdictions in the 5 counties adopt whatever we produce as a new comprehensive plan.
Want to spread it around, get some other people involved?
Could I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll try this one.
This one looking at the same bad.
That's good. I think the wired mic is better.
All right, I just wanted to add a little bit. Can everybody hear me now? Yeah. I don't normally use mics. I don't need to. What this lady's talking about, real estate here, let me just tell you what has happened in other situations. I know you won't talk local, but it's all local. In our area there, I had some friends that about my age, and they bought some land on top of a mountain. They determined how fast the city was going to grow, and they bought some land on top of a mountain as an investment property. Now, for 45 years, they paid the taxes on that property. They made payments, and they used that as their retirement. And then one day, the Planning Commission comes out, and they designate that as a no-bill zone. The day that they did that, these people basically lost 45 years of work. They lost their retirement. They lost their ability to give anything to their children at the stroke of a pen. So this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous power when, you know, these people, when they started this process, There were no restrictions on their property. They invested 45 years of hard work and money, and then it was taken away from them by some planner. And then when they went to the county commission and tried to get something done about it, they said, we don't have control. The planning commission has control. They're an independent body. They had no recourse other than go through the court and try to sue, which when you do that, you're fighting your own tax dollars. They've got tax money to go to court. You're having to do it with your private money. So the change of zoning, as she's speaking of, is a very dangerous thing, and it is something that you really need to look at. Like my ranch, if it's color-coded green, sooner or later, they're coming after it. And that's all the comment I wanted on that.
So, there we go. Just for clarification, you did say, and that's trying to relate this all back to our area here, you did say that every municipality over 50,000 across the country does have a Metropolitan Planning Commission? No. Did you say that in your intro?
I apologize.
At that, I was talking about regional transportation planning organizations, but cities, very small size, have planning and zoning commissions of all sizes.
All right.
Yeah, let me jump in on that question, because zoning is just one label for land use control, and you need to broaden out your aspects. There's other things such as zoning overlays, and a zoning overlay, as these guys would be well aware, would be used to declare open space. Open space is part of this listing in the notice of funds availability. They well know that there will be a designation for open space. Now, there are other things already on the books that will regulate land use in this area. The Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance says up front that any regulation created by FEMA in the future is already made part and parcel of your local regulation. They are also aware of that. Go out, if you're taking notes, go out and look up the Southeastern Ecological Framework. It is the mapping of the 7 southeastern states and where these green open spaces is going to be applied. How that is going to be brought about either through conservation easements, through many vehicles, legal vehicles that is, will entirely be up to the local commission and how they'll bring this about. But that is all, the maps are already there. It's just a question of getting the zoning people who have the money at hand to bring about the bureaucracy to enforce these regulations, whatever they're called, whether it's zoning regulations or flood damage prevention ordinance, against the property owner.
This gentleman up front.
I've got 2 questions. If the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and I'd like all things on it, it's not been right. If the Metropolitan Planning Commission and other planning agencies are applying for federal money in the tunes of millions of dollars, it seems to me to be a conflict of interest between what the Fed wants and their plan to take down this country into a socialized state and what the people want. It seems to me to be a conflict of interest. Can you answer that? And I've got a follow-up question to that as well.
Well, I believe that was addressed to y'all and probably to...
I guess the grant application that we applied for was this working out there?
Yes. No. It's not working well.
Is a land use. It's a regional dialogue to look at how we're going to grow from a regional perspective. It's not a social agenda from my perspective. And the federal government provided dollars, Congress provided dollars for regions to compete, to develop regional plans or to implement regional plans to improve their prosperity, to look at sustainable practices. So I'm not going to comment on social government or that nature, but that's what we're here for, and that's the activities surrounding our planning state in Tennessee.
It seems to me, though, that when you take millions of dollars, you're not going to get it without strings attached. If you guys are supposed to be working for the people in the communities you are planning around, then it seems to me that taking money from a federal organization, you're not actually working for the people. You're working for what the federal corporation wants you to do.
The money is public money. It's not federal money, it's public money, so we're dealing with public policies.
Before we move on to the next question, any comments over here?
Yeah, let me say one thing. Sustainable development is social, economic, and environmental. These people have agreed to accept the federal money. They're going to look at all three of those aspects. They're going to do data collection on households related to all three aspects of sustainable development.
Since we're up here already, we'll go ahead and we'll start moving towards the back. I promise we still got over an hour. Okay, so we'll get to as many people as we can. Go ahead.
Good morning. First of all, is this thing on?
Yes.
I'd like to welcome all our guests. You all get a temporary Big Orange Bar mitzvahs today, so you're okay. Good. You Alabama guys. Would all of the elected officials who are here please stand up and say who you are? Because I saw some well-known officials slip in here that they're present here, so we know there's important people here. I see Miss Massey hiding over there.
Give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
I see the newly elected executive of Anderson County hiding right there. Stand up, Ms. Freeman. There goes the rest of our locals. Anybody else elected officials like? I see Steve Hall, Dr. Richard Briggs,
John Reagan, representative from Anderson County.
A couple of questions, if I could, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there. Ann Garcia Garland, Oak Ridge City Council.
I'd like to, we have obviously have some very different views about this process of planning and zoning, and we know it's important for a civilized community to have things to agree and negotiate these issues. A couple of points, if I could. The data slides you showed with the people making these choices, rank order choices, in these 5 meetings, these 2,000 people. 400 people attended each meeting. Did you supply the data that was in ranking? Did individuals supply that data, those choices and those rank orders of that?
That particular slide showed the results of a survey of random individuals from around the region. They weren't generated from a meeting. They were generated from a telephone survey. The survey had a list of issues identified, and the folks rank ordered them, and that slide showed the summary of those orders.
To answer the question, then you provided these suggestions to the people over the phone, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you have this group. Now, it may be quite reliable, county to county. Doesn't mean it's valid, though, does it?
The response produced a statistically valid survey response for each of the 5 counties individually and as a whole, with a plus or minus 3 to 4%.
But only of that sample, correct?
No, the whole role of samples is to produce a statistically valid sample.
Were other choices taken that didn't correspond to other people that didn't respond to the list? Were there also that didn't show up in those numbers?
Statistically valid sample under 1,500.
Just curious.
You're getting 2 different sets of questions.
Oh, I just had a question about. I'm curious about reliability and validity of those numbers. And you called 400 people, and you gave them suggested items, and then you took maybe you only called 400. You didn't call more than 400. Just curious how the data.
No, they called many more than 400, but they had responses from 400.
That were from that forced choice list you gave.
From a list of issues that had been identified through the community forums, through our meetings with small groups.
Last question. 9 Counties One Vision was really the birth mother of PlanET. The rump committees from 9 counties were what really became PlanET. Is that right?
I would say that's not a correct statement.
That's what Joe Holtwood said.
I don't speak for Joe Holtwood.
Mr. Welch, do you think it was the rump committees from 9 Counties One Vision?
No.
It was not. They didn't exist as 9 County One Vision and come forward later.
Correct.
That lady keeps getting the hand up there real high. Go ahead, ma'am. All right, just to clarify, for these wireless mics, okay, there's only one channel for both of these mics. So when mine is on, the other one doesn't work, and vice versa. So after you ask your question, if one of the gentlemen up here have the wireless mic, make sure you turn your mic off. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. I just want a clarification and try to bring this back real local, if we can. I think that Mr. Donaldson said, or one of y'all said in the presentation, that these plans were a regional overview that would be implemented and controlled locally. They said by city councils and county commissions. Did I understand that correctly? Nodding heads. Okay.
You're getting a yes.
Okay. So the question is, right now, if there is a request for variance, you can take, if a property owner, a landowner, or a developer has a request for variance, they take that to county commission and it's voted on. If they don't like that answer, they can go to court and file an appeal. Are you saying that that process is going to still be here? In other words, if there's a regional plan and a property owner doesn't like what's happening, what recourse does that property owner have, if any, under a regional plan?
What the lady was talking about was a variance from a zoning regulation, I believe.
Or subdivision, or any type of variance.
Well, okay. Subdivision regulations are the authority of the local planning commission, whereas the zoning ordinance is the authority of the local legislative body. Most legislative bodies have set up what they call a Board of Zoning Appeals or adjustments, which handle variances. But it is a function of the zoning ordinance, which can be enacted only by the local legislative body. The subdivision regulations are enacted by the local planning commission. Nothing that could be done, we don't have a regional form of government, so all changes to subdivision regulations or zoning regulations have to be done by either the local planning commission or the local legislative body. And I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future.
So is there an appeals process for a subdivision regulation currently? I'm a little confused.
Yes. In Knox County, the Metropolitan Planning Commission is the authority that's charged with approving plats. And people have the right to ask for variances from those regulations. If they want to appeal those decisions, they can be taken to the local court of appropriate jurisdiction, which is typically Chancery Court.
I have a couple of comments. First, I think we should be realistic here and state the fact that PlanET is part of Agenda 21. Next, you mentioned grant money, and everyone's all excited every time we get grant money. That's our taxpayer money that you're using against the people to try to take our property rights away. You talk about 5 regions here. Union County Mayor had enough sense to say we don't want to be a part of PlanET anymore. You mentioned that you had all these group meetings for people, and yet we were not allowed to ask questions as a group. We had to break up in little bitty circles and have people who were planners sitting at those tables trying to control the output of what the people had to say. We wanted to speak in front of a group and let everyone hear our questions and your answers. I thank you for being here today to answer those questions, but it should have been done at every one of those meetings. And lastly, you mentioned just now in your presentation that there have been ideas in the past that have been brought up, and then finally, through the years, things have happened, and that these ideas should be brought forth, and you didn't care if it was a good idea, how it was accomplished. In other words, you don't care if people people's property rights are taken away or their stamp of stuff.
Is there a question?
Yes, I'd like to know, well, in fact, he's going to answer it for
Well,
me.
but go ahead and address it as a question. If you
Okay, then your statement was you didn't care how those things got accomplished.
Right.
What if it affects people's property? Do you care then?
will. Okay.
The comment was that I don't care if it's a group of community leaders that gets together to decide to do something to address an issue, or a local legislative body that decides to address an issue, or a chamber of commerce that gets together to decide an issue, or this group gets together to decide an issue. I don't care where those actions come from, as long as the issues get addressed and people move together.
That was, she was quoting Mr. Welch. I'd like to see what Mr. Welch has to say
So,
about his own comment.
first, let me say one thing. We want to keep you had your question. We'll try to get to as many people as possible. And as we go through this discourse, ladies and gentlemen, let's make sure. Let's make sure I know we're very excited and we're glad they're here to answer questions, but let's make sure we ask questions. Okay. I think that's very important. If we make statements and whatever, that's not going to get anything done here. So let's make sure we ask questions, and we're going to limit it to one question a person. I apologize for that. Let's go ahead and get to the next question. Oh, yeah, we'll let them comment now.
Yeah, I want clarification here. I have a document that somebody handed me, planning regulations 133402. And quoting, it says, exercising the powers granted to it by 133402, the Regulation Planning Commission, the Regional Planning Commission, shall adopt regulations governing the subdivision of land within its jurisdiction. And if I heard the gentleman, I was sitting down, I don't know which one, but if I heard him correctly, they said that the County Commission establishes zoning laws, but the Planning Commission controls the land use in those areas. And so what I'm asking is there no oversight by a public official? Can the County Commission not overrule the Planning Commission's decision, or do you have the final authority as to what can be done as far as subdivision rules go?
You're mixing apples and oranges there. What I said was that the legislative body has the authority with regard to the zoning ordinance, and the Planning Commission has the authority with regard to the subdivision regulations, which is the code that you quoted. The subdivision regulations create a process for creating maps of land division, not land use. They also create standards for public improvements that are required in order to support those land divisions. But the subdivisions regulations are there to create an orderly map for that jurisdiction and do not control land use. That's the zoning ordinance.
Oh, let's keep moving towards the back because we've done a lot up here and we'll come back up front, okay? Let's maybe either the gentleman in blue or the gentleman in red back there. We'll get to both of you guys. And then we'll make our way back up front, okay? Still got another 55 minutes.
Good morning. Mark, we have a vote Monday night on the Hillside and Ridgetop. The Briggs Amendment said that that was advisory only and non-binding. Now we're coming in on the minimum subdivision regulations to take part of the Hillside and Ridgetop and codify it. Can you explain how subdivision regulations relate to zoning? There are two votes on Monday night. If you get the vote, well, first thing, there is no vote for the subdivision regulations. You already have that. If you didn't get the vote on the zoning, what happens? Which takes precedence? Subdivision regulations or zoning?
The two items that the gentleman referred to on Monday's County Commission agenda relate to a piece of geography called the Hillside and Ridgetop Protection Area. One of them is the Planning Commission asking the legislative body, the county commission, to adopt the regulations that the planning commission has already adopted. And it turns out that we may not have to have that vote because there is no, as of Friday afternoon, we hadn't found a record of the county commission ever adopting the subdivision regulations, which is proper. They shouldn't have. But let me talk about those regulations a little bit. What we've done is create an alternative set of standards for development within the hillside and ridgetop protection area, which relaxes or reduces the minimum requirements that are stated now in the subdivision regulations. For example, there is a minimum 50-foot right-of-way dedication required for local roads. What we have adopted as the Planning Commission is that can be reduced to 40 feet if the property is within the hillside and ridgetop protection area. It also says the road pavement width can be reduced from 26 feet to 20 feet. That the requirement for curb and gutter that is standard can be eliminated within the hillside and ridgetop protection area. That the big 250-foot minimum radius on streets can be reduced within the hillside and ridgetop area. So we feel that we have created an alternative set of standards that may be used, which reduce the impact on the environment and save developers money. That is the intent of the subdivision regulation requirements. On the zoning side, we asked that within the hillside and ridgetop protection area, that the minimum front yard that's now required be able to be reduced to lessen that requirement within the hillside and ridgetop protection area.
Yes, everybody gets one question and if necessary, one follow-up.
Let me re-specify this to get a little more clarity, because I didn't get the answer I was looking for. If commission votes down the zoning, what happens then? Because the entire purpose of this is the Briggs Amendment was to protect due process. We have a concern that with the minimum subdivision regulations, you can bring in the hillside ridgetop plan, even though you were told not to. And our concern is, we want to know what the appeal process is. With minimum subdivision regulations, there is no appeal process to commission. There's no appeal process to commission. Is there an appeal process to court? Our question is due process.
In the event that the county commission does not act on the recommendation of the planning commission with regard to the amendment to the planned residential zone district requirements to reduce the front yard requirement, that's the zoning amendment. A developer wants to do that would have to ask for a variance. And should he want that and the variance be denied, his appeal process then would be to the courts. But the amendment is simply to reduce the minimum front yard requirement in the planned residential zone district if it's within the hillside and ridgetop protection area.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Okay,
I'll start from the beginning. With regard to zoning, the Planning Commission makes recommendations to the legislative body. The Planning Commission has recommended to the legislative body that they amend the requirements within the planned residential zone district to allow the reduction of the front yard requirement from 35 feet to whatever the developer wants, if that property is within the hillside and ridgetop protection area. So it is a reduction in the regulations. If the legislative body approves it, then that gives the authority to the Planning Commission to reduce that front yard requirement at the request of the developer. If they do not approve it, the developer can still ask for a variance. That request would be to the BZA. If the BZA denies that request, the appeal would be to the courts.
Which has precedence? Minimum subdivision regulations or zoning?
They work together. The subdivision regulations create the plat, the map of the property, and establish the minimum requirements for public improvements. The zoning decides what that land can be used for. And setbacks and heights and other things like that.
Okay,
They work together.
I'll study more. I don't understand.
Well,
But thank you for trying.
come and see me Monday.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. I believe the gentleman right in front of him. We'll go ahead and after him, we'll be making our way back to towards the front again, okay?
Thank you guys for being here. When I first heard about Agenda 21, I was very skeptical, kind of like a conspiracy. Like most of the people in this room, I think, I put a lot of research into it, had a lot of meetings, I learned about it. Attending my first PlanET community forum confirmed it for me, so I can thank you for that. My question is this. We've been a thorn in your side of this issue. I'd like to know if you know about Agenda 21, if you put any time into looking into it, and maybe you could put us all at ease and tell us why PlanET is not Agenda 21.
I did say I wanted to keep this to local issues, and I know that y'all consider that a local issue, but I'm going to make answering that question optional. Do you want to answer that?
Oh, come on.
To ask them to do that, I think would be a little unfair.
No, this is our land.
Transparency. We want the answer. Transparency.
Well, we're here. Isn't that why we're here? I was just giving them the option. They chose to take it. Let's listen to the answer.
Straight out.
I thought this was
We
for
are-
the people. What?
I guess you want to hear the answer?
Yes, sir.
From my perspective and from everyone that has been involved with the application process to where we are today, this has nothing to do with Agenda 21 of the United Nations. You want to, regional people can disagree. We are talking about our land in East Tennessee, property that I live on, property that you live on, and we talk about regional issues. And we can continue to improve upon the livability of our area. Similarities, terminology exist throughout the country and the world in various issues. And that's, I will not deny that at all, but we are not tracking, we are not affiliated with, in any sense of imagination, land use with the United Nations Agenda 21.
Sir, may I suggest you do a little more research because I think you're fascinated.
I believe,
Yeah, let me get into that just a little bit. J. Gary Lawrence, I'm sure some of you have read what he had to say a number of years ago. He was a planner for the city of Seattle, and he made a speech, I think, along about 2000 in Ireland, which is recorded. You can go out and look it up. And he said that in this country, they did a survey, and I actually talked to the head of ICLE, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. They are listed on page 55 of the document I have in front of me as being responsible for helping local communities across the globe enact the tenets of sustainable development, which Agenda 21 is part of. Now, in this speech that Mr. Lawrence gave, he said this survey that they conducted determined that the people in this country would not appreciate any affiliation whatsoever with the United Nations, Agenda 21, and or sustainable development. So they call their plans comprehensive planning, local land use, new urbanism. He goes through a long list in this particular paragraph about what this is all about. Now, let me say that one of the handouts in the front lobby goes into quotes from the Federal Register. Now, I don't know how you can get any more documented than that talks about Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, the Earth Summit, Smart Growth, and then above that is a quote from your Knoxville plan. Now, I'm quite certain that if you don't read the documentation, you can honestly say that this has absolutely nothing to do with any of the smart growth or sustainable development. But if you read the documentation, I think you're hard-pressed to say that the plan of action at the local level is not part and parcel of this. And let me go on to say that during the 90s, if you typed into any search engine on the internet, LA 21, you would invariably wind up with hits anywhere in the English-speaking countries of this globe, meaning local Agenda 21 had taken place and was being implemented in the 90s. But you did not find that application or that connection in the United States, and it was only into this century that we actually had those connections that we could firmly point to. Now, it's unfortunate that these gentlemen don't like to make that connection. I was in Dothan not too long ago. Their planner finally printed and published it to anybody that wanted to read it, that he had been enacting sustainable development in all of the tenants for his entire 18 years as a planner. And this was an open meeting where the principal, now the principal of the agent is the elected officials. After all, these are merely agents of your elected officials. So I said to this planner in this meeting, I says, you're to be commended. You're up front guy. You've got backbone. You're actually saying what you're doing and you're proud of it. But the local elected officials want to shy from implementing socialism at the local level. And they took really, they did kind of get hot at me about that. But if you really want to know what's going on, make written questions to your elected officials who are their principals and find out the actual connections. Get them in paper on writing stating that this is or is not part of this program, and then go forward with your inquiry.
So a satisfactory answer for the crowd on that issue. And let's move on as we come back forward. Gentlemen up here in the center table.
Hello, Mark, Jeff. You remember the second set of forums? You remember me? On the website, the PlanET's website says that 226 people participated, a total of 226 people participated in the 6 forums, which were the second set of forums. But I will tell you that in the Union County forum, there were 18 people participated according to you all, but I videotaped only 7 people responding to the questions. So I'm going to ask you, Jeff, you did a forum out in Oak Ridge here recently. Do you remember doing a forum out there? Were all of those folks at that elected officials or members of departments of the government?
They were invited by the city of Oak Ridge. I think they were elected and appointed officials from their various committees that the city of Oak Ridge has, like recreation commissions, there's Board of Zoning Appeals, and that's a diversity of groups.
Okay, was this the same type of forum that we did, that you did the 6 forums?
This was what we called a meeting in a box, but the same questions were asked at these forums, these smaller meetings, as they were at the larger forums.
And so was the information taken from that and included in?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Like I've said already, I'm trying to get to as many people as possible. We get to a point where nobody has asked a question, or where there aren't people who are new who want to ask questions. We can go back to people who have already asked questions, okay? We'll get the gentleman right next to him, and we'll just move this way, since that seems where all the questions are.
Now, can we move back to the ridgetop and hillside for a minute, since that's my pet peeve? Mark laughs. In your mission statement originally, it stated that your intent was to protect the safety and the health of Knox County residents. And my understanding is that the reason it was stated like that is that there is a state law that requires zoning of this type to have those 2 criteria at the basis of it. Now, if I understand the regulations as they exist now, you're relying on 25% or more You have to have 2 acres or more property, and only 15% of that can be cleared for the use of, or for the house and for the road, so on and so forth. That gives you about 13,000 square feet. If you take the 13,000 square feet and take out the amount for the road or the driveway, whichever you want to state it and everything, it leaves you roughly 10,000 square feet to put a house on. Now the average house in Knox County is about 1,600 square feet. If you take 40 by 40 and put it dead center on a 100 by 100 lot, 10,000 square feet, that gives you about 32 feet, 32 and a half feet on from any side of that house to the forest. Now we know from past history in this area what happens when you add storms, water, high wind, large trees in close proximity to houses. We had a whole series of trees falling on houses. Now it would seem to me that rather than protecting our safety by putting forth these types of criteria as far as how much you can clear, that you're actually putting people in danger. I went and looked at a house yesterday that was for sale that a tree had fallen on, right through the center of the house. Luckily, nobody was killed. But we have had people killed here. And if your responsibility, a part of your responsibility is to look at the health and safety of Knox County, I think you've done just the opposite by trying to enforce these regulations.
Is that a question?
There's a statement, you can reply if you like.
Mr. Harris is mixing apples and oranges once again. The Hillside and Ridgetop Protection Plan has been adopted, but not codified. There are no regulations. Other than the regulations that we have adopted, reducing the requirements for road improvements. But to take his example, he's trying to apply a tree clearing standard for a 2-acre parcel to a 10,000 square foot parcel. It's not the same thing, no, Ronnie, and you know that. The Hillside and Ridgetop Protection Plan also has one entire section devoted to fire-wise strategies about clearing around houses to prevent forest fires and at the same time preventing large trees from falling on houses. So if you read the top plan in its entirety and read it thoroughly, you'll understand that it works together to protect the health and safety of people.
I read the whole plan, Mark. It doesn't.
I'm going to go to the lady at the table on the right.
My name is Trina Vaughn. I live in Oak Ridge, and I participated in your Oak Ridge meeting, the meeting in the box. And I just would like to address your statement earlier and answer to his question. Yes, that meeting was limited to people who were elected to various boards and commissions within the city. It was convenient, I thought, that most of the independent thinkers in that room were dispersed among the groups. So the end result was not a reflection of what I would suggest is probably some of the thoughts that have been expressed here. A lot of the focus today has been on the long-term impact of PlanET, but I would like a better understanding of the immediate cost. We understand $4.3 million is what started all of this. But were you all already being paid by taxpayers for your job, number one, before PlanET ever came along? And number two, how many government employees are facilitating these meetings after hours, and what kind of impact on the payroll are they having? In other words, how much money are we as taxpayers spending for this initiative above and beyond that $4.3 million?
I am a government employee and was, paid prior to this grant application. My salary is not coming out of PlanET funding that's coming to East Tennessee. The time that folks put in, that I understand, at least from the Metropolitan Planning Commission standpoint, our night meetings and that, we are not paid for those meetings going out to that. We do not get overtime pay when we go out to meetings. Some of us may take time off to compensate or come in late mornings and then work late in the evenings, but we are not paid to attend those meetings at all. What other local governments may do as far as their participation in PlanET, I am not sure or aware of. So yes, there is additional cost that is being put into PlanET over and above the $4.3 million from MPC staff time and other cities and counties participating in that. And I do not have a figure of that, but we would probably guess with leverage resources that from the University of Tennessee and what other cities and that have said that they will commit to it as far as the time would be somewhere in the range of a total of about $6 million.
Just to clarify, is that $6 million in addition to the $4.2 million?
A total.
Total. And did you just suggest that government employees are working off the clock for free?
I'm sorry?
Did you suggest that government employees might be working off the clock for free at these meetings in the evenings?
I'm suggesting I put in more than my 40 hours per week that I get paid for, that I put in 50 or 60 hours a week out there attending a lot of meetings, and I do not get paid for 50 or 60 hours of work.
Are you considered management level exempt?
Pardon me?
Are you
Most of our
considered,
employees are exempt from.
so you're
working
required to
overtime.
work whatever hours it takes to get the job
Correct.
done? But the lower level, when we say lower level employees that were facilitating this meeting, which I think I counted at least 4 or 5, I'd be surprised to find out that they donated their time. Do you think they donated their time?
From the city of Oak Ridge, you'll have to ask the city of Oak Ridge staff on that. Most of the folks from MPC are providing their time, and they may get comp time off if they're at various type of management, non-management type level.
Thank you.
All right, we're still trying to get to everybody. I'm going to get this area over here, and we'll move back to the back. Just had someone come up here and try to say, why don't you call on this person? I'm going to try to get to everybody. I'm not excluding anybody, not singling anybody out, so we're going to try to get to as many people as possible, okay? We'll just keep moving. We'll go to this gentleman right here.
I was a senior transportation planner, senior environmental planner, project manager in the state of California. Did that 17 years. One of the things that I've seen happen is if the federal government gives you money, they expect to have a hand in what happens to the plan. I know that this plan will have to go up to HUD since they gave you the money for a review, and any change that they want to make prior to that, I've seen it happen in California. Then once they determine this is what's going to happen, they have the opportunity to demand that it be put into place as it is, and if you don't, they end up fining the county or the city as things happen. What can they do with your plan? Do you have to submit that plan to HUD prior to publishing what you create?
And obviously, the follow-up on that is there any recourse if the plan is not followed, right?
Right. Our plan is, will be reviewed throughout the process by HUD since they are the granting agency. I understand that they are not going to be saying that this is an approved plan or not an approved plan. What they'll be looking at is our grant application, say, did you meet the intent of your grant application, and are you able to address those issues? As your background in transportation with the state of California, there are acceptance of any federal or state dollar. You have to meet certain minimum requirements. Just as you're building a highway with federal money, there are minimum requirements you have to meet. Our guidance with the Fed is we would like you to be able to address these following issues based on our grant application. They are, as we understand it, will not be approving this plan. They will not be asking or telling us to implement this plan.
Will they have opportunity to make changes to the plan and direct you to accept their changes?
Based on the discussions that we have had with them throughout, no. I don't believe so, Mark, if you disagree or not.
No.
They were involved in reviewing our plan of action, which established our process. They are very adamant that we create an open process, and they have established that we take a comprehensive look within this plan, and that is why we have the 5 focus areas that have been created around transportation, housing, economy, environment, and health. And we talk regularly on the phone with them as far as them reminding us to stay on track, to meet the commitments that we pledged to meet in our contract and in our application, and to address those issues that we said we would address.
Yeah, let me just comment quickly on that. Obviously, he finally got around to answering the questions that there's going to be a review of whatever they do. I fully anticipate that there may not be a need for that, because if they're all on board with sustainable development and a working relationship between the federal government and this agency, then in fact they would know exactly what is being done. This is the Livable Communities Act is a partnership, calls for a partnership between HUD. It's not just HUD now. It's the Department of Transportation and EPA. All of those agencies have to look in on what is being done and approve it in order for the $4.3 million to continue to be delivered to these agencies. So now, when I talk about the notice of funds available, I quoted on this particular document that's out in the lobby, the 2010. The 2011 notice of funds available is 20 to 30 pages longer. So obviously, with more words come more regulations and more this and that. So every time the government speaks and they hand out $1, the next year it might be 50 cents and more regulations. So count on it. We're going to comply with everything that those 3 agencies have in mind for your local area.
All right, I'm going to get one more question up here, and then we're going to go start in the back again and work our way forward. Okay, Robert? Okay. Come on, up here, the lady in the green sweater here.
Hi there. I'm fairly new to this PlanET information. I've done a little bit of reading on Agenda 21. I am not a native. I don't think I ever will be, because I wasn't born in the good state of Tennessee. But I've been here for 16 years. I'm a property owner, and I'm very concerned, as I know everyone else is. I've been here to listen, and what I'm hearing is a lot of anti-planning for the future. My question to the gentleman on the right from Alabama, good state by the way, what is the alternative to long-range planning if the truth is there in the slide presentation that in 2040 the population in this area is going to be huge? Before you answer that, sir, my follow-on question is it the opinion of this group that we don't need any regulation, any planning, and we don't ever want to take grant money from anybody?
Amen. I don't want their dirty money. They can keep their dirty money.
Sir.
Let's not do that, please. And let's go ahead and try to, I know she did address the crowd, which I don't recommend.
I'm sorry.
But let's try to get the people. I see some people making, and I've been hearing this whole time, but when people are asking questions, please don't turn to your neighbor and make comments, especially snide ones or disrespectful ones. That is not what we're here for, okay? So if you're finished, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to these gentlemen.
Okay, the question as I understand it is, do we need planning? How did this country come into existence without planners? And if you want to look for the country that has done the most planning, look to Soviet Russia. They have planning every 5 years with incremental updates, and their environmental trackability is not very good. Now, our federal government has adopted officially sustainable development as a tenet. Go and look and understand what sustainable development means to private property rights. And understand that when you accept that money from the federal government, it requires regulations to be written by whatever planning agency might come into play that will restrict your private property rights. Now, it is my contention that a fine example of cities that have not had planning, I think it's Boston. I don't think they have planning to date, but at least 10 or 15 years ago, they had no planning whatsoever. How is it that we as a society grew up? How did we get along without planning? So, but my point being is that the road that has been mapped out for this is already set in stone. All you have to do is read the documentation and begin to understand, for instance, Habitat 1. I know a lot of people have looked at Habitat 1. That was a United Nations conference held back in 1976. Quoting one paragraph from that, it says that the free enterprise system dealing with property rights is inefficient and has to be done away with. And that making one dime off of the sale or anything associated with your property rights is an act of social injustice. So if you begin to think about what these regulations are going to do to society and have already done, for instance, there was one man, I think in Oregon, that just spent 30 days in jail because he collected rainwater on his own property. There's many, many examples, and this is from the International Code Council. The key word is international. And your local community has already adopted the tenets of this particular international organization. They update every 3 years. So if your house is in compliance this cycle, and they write, which they will do in the next 3 years, write new regulations, and you're in non-conforming status, you know what that means when you go to sell your house. You have to bring it up to the standards. This will destroy the second-hand housing market. I mean, the planning that's set out for us is already readable. All we have to do is read it. I hope that answers your question.
Well, since the lady addressed that to both of us, I'd like to do a little bit of a summary on it. Our founding fathers wrote the Constitution with negative rights. I know that to social planners, that's not what they like to hear. They like to hear positive rights, what the government says they can do for you. But this country was founded on unalienable, and Thomas Jefferson knew exactly what he was doing when he used that term. You hear it said inalienable, unalienable, but he actually wrote unalienable, meaning that what was given to man by God, no other man could put a lien upon. Our Constitution talks about individual rights, life, liberty, and property. When the first draft of the Constitution was written, that's what it said, life, liberty, and property. Jefferson said, well, that's redundant. Everybody knows that life and liberty are property. And so he changed it to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But our Constitution expresses negative rights, what the government is not allowed to do to you, or what the government is not allowed to take from you. What we have here, and there has to be planning, there's no doubt about that, but the planning needs to be done by elected officials who are subject to the call of the voters. What we have here, we have an unelected board who is not subject to anybody, in spite of what they say. If they choose, according to this regulation right here, they can impose zoning, not zoning, but land use planning through this subdivision rules. If the planning is done by elected officials, then at least the people have the right to recall. They have some place to go, but when it is an unelected board, you have nowhere to go. And so that is the main thing that I object to. You know, they're taking your property, and when they come up like this one subdivision I heard of up here, beyond like this thing, this hilltop thing, started off just being the ridge tops, and then it got to be anything, you couldn't build on anything above a 30-degree slope, and now you can't build on anything above a 15-degree slope. My gosh, down close to where I live, you know, we got farmers plowing a lot more than 15-degree slopes, and they're bush hogging up and down the hills very rapidly, I'd say, coming down. Some of that stuff's 25, 30 degrees. It's still usable land. But once you have these unelected boards created, now that's called a Soviet. Yep. We have bureaucrats who are dictating how your property is going to be used beyond the reach of either elected officials, and I don't understand why elected officials are not just irate about this. This shadow government is being created that controls the money, and it's beyond their reach. And when it's beyond the reach of the elected officials, it's beyond the reach of the voters.
If I might just have a word about the Hillside and Ridgetop Protection Plan. That is a plan that was initiated by the City Council and the County Commission of Knox and adopted by the City Council and the County Commission of Knox County. So they initiated the process and they made the final decision on adopting the plan.
Well, I would like to say I'm somewhat relieved that we're only talking about, when I saw this Plan ET up here, I misread it at first. I didn't realize, I guess that's planned for East Tennessee. When I first read it, I thought that they were going to try to control the entire plan. So I'm at least relieved about that.
All right, we have a bin over in this area here. Bethany, let's come to this middle left table, and then actually hit Robert real quick in the back. I've been telling Robert we're going to be coming back to him for a while, and then we'll come up here where Kevin is and keep making our way around. And just so everybody knows, we are at 15 minutes until 12 o'clock. So.
The lady from Oak Ridge over here was talking about money a while ago. In other words, she was asking, what are we paying for this beyond the federal money, And so I'm going to ask for a definition. This is for both sides of the table here, too, so I'd like to hear both of your opinions. It was stated earlier, we know what Agenda 21 is. The question is, whether there's an association with local organizations. And I understood these guys' comments. However, there's another agency that you guys said you talked to down in Alabama that hasn't been mentioned much, and I want to make sure I got the connection of where these people are coming from. You called it ICLEI, it's I-C-L-E-I. I know for a fact that the city of Oak Ridge pays dues to this organization to be a member, and that their purpose is to educate and help plan or guide them into the planning of these regional type things. So I know our first Bush and Clinton Bushes, everybody signed in and agreed to Agenda 21 down in South America, and that is coming from the UN. And then we've got local planners, we got regional. This is something we can associate to. Obviously, some of the people know these guys up here on this planning commission because they talked with them before. So we can identify that they're in our area, and 5 County is our region, so we can talk about that and complain here. But who is ICLEI? What is ICLEI, and what's their role in this, and where are they getting their money? Is this some sort of a quasi-federal organization? You mentioned the other agencies like HUD and all that, and how their involvement in it, and the regulations we're going to have from that. But where does ICLEI fall into this, and where do they get their money?
Who are you addressing that to first, Robert? Doesn't matter. Okay. With these guys, I'll ask, is Knox County or Knox City involved directly or indirectly with the organization that was mentioned? He mentioned that Oak Ridge is paying dues. I can't verify that or not verify that. But is Knox County or Knox City involved indirectly or directly?
Well, neither Jeff nor I are employees of either Knox County or the city, but it's my understanding that the city is a member of ICLEI, and as a result of ideas that have been shared, the city has saved an enormous amount of money by implementing energy reduction policies and programs. That's the extent of my knowledge of ICLEI.
Gentlemen?
Well, Don will speak at much greater length, but I try to put things in simple terms, just so you understand the definition of sustainable. Sustainable means that something will last a long time. If you and I are not allowed to use any of it, it'll last practically forever. So the intent of sustainable development is not to develop. The intent of sustainable development is not to allow you to develop most of what you would like to.
This is the document now that everybody's referring to, Agenda 21. that all the government officials like to say we have no knowledge of. ICLAI is listed on page 55, and you can go look up their website. They have a rather extensive website. In Alabama, Huntsville and Birmingham have contracted with them. I'm sure that you can look for Tennessee and see how many other cities or county governments have participated or paid them for their expertise in the implementation of the tenets of sustainable development. So let me just take a moment and read to you page 55, where it says in paragraph 7.2.1, cities of all countries should reinforce cooperation among themselves, and cities of the development countries under the agencies of non-governmental organizations active in this field should, as the International Union of Local Authorities and the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, and then it goes on and talks about the World Federation of Twin Cities. So all three of these organizations are involved in the implementation. ICLAI is probably the best known in this country for having the expertise of greenhouse gas emission regulations, social justice regulations, and environmental justice regulations. Just go to the federal government's Department of Justice and look up environmental justice. I have in my presentation a badge that is from the Criminal Enforcement Division of the EPA. So you can actually commit a crime against Mother Earth. That's exactly where we're going. Sustainable development is a religion. There are various people that adhere to different tenets of this. At one end, you've got the zealots that say you can't take a shovel and go dig on Mother Earth. And at the other level, you've got somebody that's just making money off of it because they understand that there is a profit to be made here. So your money, your tax dollar from this local area is going to this international organization. By the way, they have such a bad name now, they're going to change it. And it is governments for local governments for sustainability. So they're morphing. As you identify them and know what kind of organization it is, they'll change their names. And that's a typical thing that you've seen in the past.
And I do believe that that change has been very recent, right?
Yeah,
within the past 2 years.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go over here to the next. And Robert, do you feel satisfactory answer there? Okay. Go ahead and get the gentleman in the yellow shirt by the fireplace.
The lovely lady in the green top touched on something a few minutes ago that I want to expand on. When you gave your video presentation, you mentioned a survey and you showed a slide of a survey that was done, I think, by the University of Tennessee. It seemed to me, in just a quick look I had at it, that the top 4 or 5 comments on that regarded more economic issues than they did planning type issues. And you also stated that we're going to need to provide residences for 300,000 new people and 240,000 jobs in 30 years from now. Now, as a businessman, I can't tell you what the economy is going to be like next year. Due to economic pressures, due to a lot of government regulation pressures. And I don't see, I guess I'm saying I'm not necessarily accepting your premise on why we need to do what we're doing, because I have no idea that we're going to have 300,000 people additional living in this area in 30 years. Possibly, but it's too far out to know for sure. So I just question the premise of really why you think all this has to be done and what makes you so sure that you're accurate in that premise.
No, like you said, you have no crystal ball, nor do we sitting up here have that crystal ball. But we do know, as Mark alluded to, over the last 60 years, we have grown about 1.5% per year, just pretty much consistently, 1.4 and 1.5% a year. The best guess, estimate right now is that we will continue to do that based on past trends. So,
Given that past trend of growth, should we not be looking at how this region prepare and accommodate that residential growth and that
Your mic's cutting out.
talk really loud. Absolutely wireless.
So I guess the question is, we will be growing, whether it's 300,000 or 200,000 in the next 30 or 40 years. Should we not be asking ourselves, how best should we accommodate that growth? That's really what we're asking you, and we're being asked by local governments and state governments to, how are you going to accommodate that growth? Again, whether it's 100,000 or 300,000, there will be growth. How is your transportation system going to accommodate that? Who is going to pay for those transportation infrastructure? How are you going to do that? Where will you provide the schools? Where will you be providing the housing and that? It's all the partnerships. Should we not be asking those questions? That is what PlanET is about, is asking those questions and hearing from you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get a follow-up over here, and then we'll probably only have time for one or two more questions.
Very quickly. There are 27 principles in the beginning of this book. Number 15 is called the precautionary principle. The federal government has already adopted it. It's being taught in law schools currently. It simply says that you have to come forward to the government and prove that your action on your property will not harm any aspect of sustainable development, be it social, environmental, or economic. So this is a reversal of innocent until proven guilty. You are now guilty, and you have to come forward before a board and prove that your actions are not going to cause harm.
Okay, let's get another question over here.
Let me add to that too. The precautionary principle says that you're required to act if you think it could cause damage, even though, in the words of the document, even though there is no conclusive proof that this damage will occur. So you're being asked at this point to take drastic measures based on what some planner thinks might happen 30 years in the future.
Okay, we're in less than 10 minutes, so let's keep the questions. I know you get it all out, but let's keep it as short as possible, okay? And then we'll get our answers and try to get as many in as we can before noon.
Thank you. My name is Randy. I'm a Knox County resident. I had pre-prepared 5 questions. I'm only going to focus on the one question, number 4. Questions 1, 2, and 3 really related to all the sustainable development, ICLEI, smart growth questions that have been raised. Question number 5 related to John Woolman's question earlier. But question number 4, I found it amusing when I purchased this book this past week called Screwed. No inference intended with the title of the book, but I found it fascinating that on page 70, paragraph 3, and if I could steal Don's approach here in reading a comment from the book, you mentioned rainwater a little bit ago. I never thought much about rainwater until I read page 70, paragraph 3. Houston, Texas taxes rain, and Knoxville, Tennessee is thinking of following suit. I'd like to repeat that sentence before going on to sentence 2 and 3. Houston, Texas taxes rain, and Knoxville, Tennessee is thinking of following suit. Because rainwater runoff from private property pollutes streams, Houston charges a fee that private property owners have to pay when it rains. The city gets $400,000 a year by taxing rain. The American Policy Center reports that some churches in South Carolina pay an annual rain runoff fee of as much as $2,600. My specific question, is Knoxville, Tennessee, in fact, contemplating taxing rain in any manner, under any circumstances?
Let's give him the floor, please.
Once again, I'm not an employee of the city of Knoxville, and I have no idea.
My email address is on the top of that preparation, feel free to respond to me on any of the 5 or all of the 5 questions.
There are many tenets of these regulations that we have not discussed. Impervious surface is one of them. Believe me, they will adopt a local law that says that if you have too much of your property covered by impervious surface, that you will be taxed on that, because it interrupts the natural flow of water into the earthly domain of animals. Essentially is what it's all about. And if you go in and look up impervious concrete, they are doing currently experiments with a porous concrete. And now some of the cities are ripping up their asphalt and putting down this porous concrete. Now I think anybody that wasn't born last night realizes that when water goes into concrete and it freezes, guess what happens? So, I mean, how illogical this can become is beyond the scope of the average individual. Impervious surface is just one of them.
And with that, it is 12 o'clock. I know that we can sit here all day long. I want to thank the gentlemen up here who came to give them a round of applause. Let's thank them all of you coming. Especially thank Richard as well with the Tennessee Liberty Alliance. Give them a round of